In today's video, I'm showing you how to use your sublimation acrylic paint to create these very cool and unique sublimation designs. Let's talk supplies. The star of the show is Artesprix sublimation acrylic paint. I got a set which is 4 sublimation colors plus a white mixing agent. You'll also need some craft sticks and some of these 2-ounce plastic cups. You can get these at Dollar Tree or Amazon. And we will need a food scale, watercolor paper, and then we will need some water and a pipette. Also for this technique, we're using Elmer's Glue All. Make sure that it's glue all, not school glue. We will also need a hard surface, so I'm using this old glass frame, and we will need masking tape and a tub of water. It'll make sense, I promise. So now let's get started. The first step is to mix your paints. Let me show you my recipe before we get started. We want to mix the sublimation paint with a medium. Now our medium is Elmer's Glue All, but we don't want to add too much of it because that will dilute our sublimation paint, if it makes sense. So I have found that for every 5 grams of sublimation paint, you can only add 2 to 2.5 Elmer's Glue All and then compensate with water to adjust the consistency. So now that that's settled, let's go to our food scale and add about 5 grams of black sublimation paint. This came out to be 5.2, which is fine, and then I zero out the scale and I go with my Elmer's Glue All. I put it in a condiment bottle to make it easier for pouring. I wanted to add about 2 or 2.5 grams, and this came down to be 2.3. So now I want the total to be about 5.2 or 5 grams, so I compensate that with water and I go in with a pipette to make sure that I get the accurate measurements. You don't need to rush this, you just need to add a little bit at a time. Once it hit the 5 grams mark, I stopped and I started stirring to make sure that it's the right consistency. Your mixed paint is a liquid now, but it shouldn't be very thick, and at the same time it shouldn't be very liquidy. Some people describe the consistency as runny honey or a heavy cream consistency. So if you feel that the paint is still thick, feel free to add extra few drops of water and then stir again to make sure that you get the right consistency. And the consistency matters because we will need these paints to flow across the paper. So now you'll need to use the same technique to mix all the colors that you'd like to use for your designs. Keep in mind that you can totally mix your own colors, just use the color mixing chart that's on Artesprix website. I mixed all the paints that came in the set, which is black, red, yellow, and blue, and then I also mixed white, which is not a sublimation paint, it's just a mixing agent, and I like to use it in between colors to make different shades. After mixing all the paint, I brought out a secret ingredient that I know about from my knowledge of acrylic pouring. It is acrylic pouring oil, and this stuff is very strong, so a little drop goes a long way, and you only need to put it in 1 or 2 of the mixed paints, not all of them. This is basically silicone oil, and what it does is that it makes nice lacing effects when the paints are overlapped together. And the tiny dash or a drop is more than enough, and just make sure that you mix it afterwards. So now that our paints are ready, let's prepare our watercolor paper. You'll need to prepare your watercolor paper by basically giving it a bath. You can do this under the sink, but I wanted to show you that I just give it a little bath to make sure that it doesn't warp on us. Once you get it out of the water, you'll need to stick it on the hard surface that you're going to be using. I'm using this old glass from a picture frame. And now use your masking tape to tape it all across. I know it feels like a lot of steps, but trust me, this will make sure that the paper sticks there and doesn't warp on us. So now we're ready to have some fun with our paint. We're going to manipulate how the paint flows. This is very easy and very beginner friendly, and you do this by dumping drops of paints on the paper however you like. Before dropping my paints, I like to think about what color I will get when 2 paints are mixed. So as you can see here, I place my yellow next to the blue because I know they will give me green when they get mixed. And I also put the blue and the red next to each other because I know they will give me violet or purple when they get mixed. So I need you to think about that as you're dropping paints and deciding what to do. And now once you feel like you've laid enough color, now is the fun part. I usually like to use a bubble tea straw and I start blowing these paints together to get this cool effect. I find this to be very fun, and I like that I get to choose what color to blow over what, and it gives you a little bit of control. And the nice effect that you see with the black on top of the yellow and the black on top of the blue is caused by the acrylic pouring oil that we used earlier. Now you can continue to use a straw if you'd like, but if you're old like me, you can also use a mini blower to help you a little bit. This was more powerful, so it moved the paint faster than I did with the straw, but I felt like I was in less control, so I eventually went back to the straw. Excuse my head, but I definitely had more control with the straw, and it gave me the ability to be able to move the paints to my liking. And you can see here that the main idea is to spread all the paint across the paper, and these were all created from the few drops that I added in the beginning. I eventually added a drop or two of the yellow, but that was about it, and you can already see the cells that are created by adding the acrylic pouring oil like I mentioned before. I eventually stopped when I was out of breath, but look at how pretty it came out. So now let's leave that to dry and let's do method 2, which is a paint pour but with our sublimation paint. You'll need to start with an empty cup and you'll start layering the paint inside of it. I like to pour each color at a different spot to prevent them from mixing or getting muddy altogether. And just like I mentioned with the first technique, I always like to keep in mind the color combinations that are going to result when these colors mix. I'm also using one of these 2-ounce cups and I like to lay colors until it's close to the top but not too full. Once you are done, place the board with the paper attached to it on top of the cup and then flip it and watch the magic happen. I like to wait about 40 seconds before removing the cup, and I like to move the cup across the paper to make sure that there is something for the paint to flow onto. And now you'll hold your board and move it slowly in all the directions, just like I'm doing it here. I don't know how to describe it. You just want to do it steady and slow to make sure that the paint keeps flowing across the paper. And you will see that the paint is making cool effects, and that's again caused by the acrylic pouring oil that we added. And once you feel that you have spread the paint enough, you'll be done. Look at that. And now let's leave that to dry and let me show you an extended version of that technique. So when you go to Michael's, you'll find this Drizzle collection by FolkArt, and it's in the paint section, and it's basically a set of different tools that you can use with paint pouring. I will also link them in the description box down below, in addition to all the supplies that we've used today. So this is like a strainer that you can use with paint pouring in general, and it creates its own pattern when you use it. It was a set of 3, and I'm using the smallest one with our pour today. As you can see, I put it on my paper with the circle side face up. And then I just started pouring paint, switching between the different colors that I have. The more you add paint, you'll see that this tool creates like a flower pattern, but don't get too attached to it because you will see what happens to it at the end. Now, if you haven't done so already, don't forget to hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe because you don't want to miss out on cool videos like these. So now back to our sublimation painting. I continued to add paint, and as you can see, the tool created this flower pattern. And now the paint wouldn't flow any further, so I had to move it, and that's when the flower went bye-bye. But honestly, that's okay because it turned out so good at the end. This created this marbling effect that is different from the other 2 methods that we did before. And this was by far the messiest, but what is crafting without making a mess, really? After moving the paints around enough, I had to let this air dry. And for all of these, you have to let them dry overnight just to be safe. After waiting, which is the worst part, let me show you how they turned out. This is the first one, and actually this technique dries the fastest. I think this one dried at about 3 hours or so. This is the second technique, which is our acrylic pour. I had some extra paint, so I added that part. And then this is the last one, and they all turned out so pretty. So now we are ready to sublimate. Let's use these sublimation designs to sublimate on any sublimation blank. I started by cutting out the sublimation design that I'm going to use. And then for this one, I like to tear around the sublimation design to avoid getting any harsh lines on my sublimation blank. So I went all around the design to make sure that I have like a rectangular design without any harsh edges. So now step 1 is to place your blank face down on our design. I'm using my paint pour design to sublimate on magnets. And I just took my time to figure out how to place them to get the best areas of my design. And then for my other design with the FolkArt tool, I'm using it to sublimate on a canvas tote bag. For the canvas tote bag, I brought out my pressing pillow and I covered it in protective paper to catch any bleeding from the inside, if any. And then I placed my design face down on the tote bag and I just made sure that the pillow is bigger than my design. And then the last design was the design where we blew the paint with the straw, and I used this to sublimate on a 20-ounce tumbler. And again, I had to tape parts of the paper to make sure that the design meets without overlapping. So now the next step is to tape all of our designs to our sublimation blanks. For the tote bag, I use heat-resistant tape, and when taping, I'd rather be safe than sorry, so sometimes I go overboard, but that's okay. Now for the magnets, I had to use the masking tape because the heat-resistant tape wasn't sticking as well, and I'm guessing this has to do with the fact that we used the acrylic pouring oil. So I used the masking tape for both the tumbler and the magnets. Once we are done taping, we are ready to sublimate. The magnets were pressed at 400 degrees for 75 seconds, and the tote bag went at 400 degrees for 45 seconds. And then I press my tumbler at 365 for 60 seconds, and once that's done, I rotate it and I press it one more time. And with that, you are now ready to reveal your unique sublimation designs. I absolutely love how they turned out. Let me know if you have a favorite technique, but I absolutely love how we can make these unique designs, or painting if I might say, without any printer. As always, all the materials used will be listed in the description box down below. Please let me know in the comments if you'll ever try any of these techniques, and if you do, don't forget to tag me. And I hope this inspired you to get creative and make something. Now, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next video.